The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello friends, thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week we have a huge show. We're going to recap 2 games and preview 2 games. Those are the 3-2 win over El Paso in the Open Cup, the 2-1 loss away in Cincinnati, and then the 2 games coming up this week. My name is Landon Cottom, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey everybody, I'm Jeremiah Bentley. And Landon, there's no way to start this show without talking about the beautiful Verde head of hair that you have right now. And we talked about it a little bit before we started recording. I think maybe you got a little more than you expected. So maybe just talk us through kind of that day, like going into the chair, what it was like. What was it like the first time that you saw yourself in the mirror afterwards, and then maybe what it's like going forward.
Yeah, I was just kind of giggling the whole time just because of how funny it was. Because you go in, whenever you do like a bright color like this, you have to bleach it first. And so I just sat there with a stupid shower cap on my head for half an hour or whatever, 20 minutes, whatever it was. And then they wash that out and it's bleached. And then they put the paint on. It looks like I'm wearing a green shower cap. And they wash that out. And I walk around the corner and see it in the mirror. And it is significantly brighter green than I was aiming for. I'm not going to lie, listeners, a peek behind the curtain here. I was not necessarily aiming for the Austin FC hex code of bright verde. I was trying to get a little bit darker than that. That is not what happened. It is quite bright. Some of you have seen photos. I'm sure we'll post some more, and then we'll maybe put some video of this recording on there. But it is very bright green.
Yeah, I think there's no other way to describe it. I know St. Ed's coach Nick Cal sent us a cartoon picture of the Joker, suggesting that maybe is the new.
That is not far off from the color that I got.
Okay. That's what I was going to say. Like, I thought it was kind of silly at first, but now seeing you from here, obviously understanding lighting, I'm like, this maybe he was right, and that's what you're getting.
And it's not Heath Ledger Joker. It's like comic book Joker.
Yeah, yes, for sure. That's what it is. It's the greenest of possible greens. So
the reason I did this is because we put this challenge out for the Patreon. You guys met that challenge, so here we are. I went out to the Sunset Valley Farmers Market to the St. Blaine's booth to pick up the hot sauce the other day. And it was, I'd met Blaine there once before, but it was his wife working the stall there this last weekend. And I start walking up. I've never met her. She's never seen me. And before I'm like 30 feet away, and she looks at me and goes, like, holds up a hand, like 1 second, and then goes back to start getting it. It's like, Blaine told me you would be hard to miss.
I think that's very well described. Okay, so I also saw some requests for what it would take in terms of Patreon to also have a matching beard, which I don't know if you've posted this outside of like a Slack or social, but I loved your answer on that.
Yeah, the hair, especially in a place like Austin, the hair is like, it's out there, but this could be seen as just a fashion choice. I think the beard crosses the line into stunt territory and is like, I've never seen a colored beard that I feel like you could like sit at a desk next to someone at an office and like still focus or take them seriously.
It's like when like on Halloween where and the people that like dress up over the top and then try to have a serious conversation with you, and you're like, I'm sorry, you're dressed like Bozo the Clown with the nose and the purple hair and the face makeup. I don't care like if your project is being delivered on time or not. Like, I just can't take this seriously. Is that what you're saying about the beard?
So my answer, I think this was maybe in LV Slack or somewhere, that it would need to take like, this is now my full-time job level of Patreon supporters. I mean, we are very grateful for the folks we do have, and there's a lot more of you than there were a few weeks ago, but we're still far away from that point. So maybe next year we can up those goals and make me look like a complete freak.
All right, you mentioned the hot sauce. So I think it's exciting news. It was exciting news for everybody that got in early on that. But one, you do have the actual hot sauce itself in hand with a beautiful label that we had described previously, but it's like really cool to see it in person. And then also, if you were to go to try to sign up for that level right now on Patreon, you would not be able to because we've actually managed to like sell out that level for the time being.
Yeah, so we underestimated. I don't think we had the hair idea yet, and underestimated how much y'all would be motivated by that. So we only ordered a certain amount of hot sauces from St. Blaine's. And we've met that limit now, so we don't have any more to give out. We'll see, like maybe that will change in the future, but it might not. So for the time being, like the $10 level is closed. We still have quite a few spots for the $5 level if you're still interested in joining and supporting the show. But stay tuned. We'll see if we can open up the $10 one again, but don't hold your breath. It might not happen. Sorry.
All right, but let's go ahead and get into this. The story of the week here. So we get Austin going 1-1 on the week, get a win at home in the US Open Cup over El Paso, and then a loss on the road in Cincinnati. In league play, Austin sits now 8th in the West, which is still just, well, if the playoffs are the same as they were last year, it would still be just within the playoff spot, but with a -7 goal differential.
Yeah, we're getting to a point in the season, and we can probably talk about this in the previews of the games coming up, where whether or not like deserve or should be doing better, like it's gonna stop mattering here pretty soon, and we're getting to this run of a lot of games. If you start a downhill slide, it's going to be tough to come out of it because there's so many games coming up. A lot of them are tough games. They're certainly not easier than a lot of the ones we've had in the last couple of months. So Austin really needs to step up, and we were hoping that the embarrassing first half against El Paso would maybe be a bit of a stimulus there, like a shot in the arm to say, hey, we need to do better. Let's wake up. And they did in that second half. We're hoping maybe they could do that in Cincinnati. And I don't think they were terrible in Cincinnati, but it certainly wasn't the renaissance we were hoping to see.
No, absolutely not. Well, do you want to talk about the best 7 minutes of the season so far,
Yeah.
which I think was Wednesday night in El Paso? And I guess to set this up, and I wrote this in the notes later. We'll just get it off the top here. So, it's 2-0 in the first half. Things are looking dire. Mike and Steph come over to check on Jackson and I to see how we're doing. And they're like, we're all going upstairs to see Landon. Like, we can't suffer this like without a little like clan of like-minded individuals. And so we get up there, you, Ashley, Long, Mike and Steph, Jackson, me. Is there anybody else that we forget?
Our friend Logan was with Long.
Oh.
I think that was all. Apologies, anybody listening who was also sitting there, but there was a lot of us, so it's hard to remember.
So it was, in one way, going up there to cry together was going to be comforting, but then we had an offensive explosion, and we got to celebrate this 3-2 win over El Paso when everything went right for a very short amount of time, and that was enough.
Yeah, I was kind of already having a good time before the goals started coming in because you were all there, to the extent where I think you should all call your ticket representatives and see if you can move up there permanently.
It is a great view. I don't know if I want to be up there on Wednesday night when it's 103 degrees or whatever it's going to be.
They at least moved kickoff back to where we won't be in the sun for any of the game.
Yeah,
which
that's true.
Would have been true at 7:30.
Yeah, and but I was thinking about you in the preview last week when you talked about, it was great in the preseason to see Brendan Vasquez bodying USL competition, and then we happened to, for this brief point in time, see what he gets both goals and an assist, right? So he definitely bodies USL competition here. I think we all hoped it would carry over to the weekend, which I guess it didn't really for him because it was a PK, but there was not transferability for the club as a whole.
Yeah, from the goals going in, and then also for the quote unquote bad luck, because Brandon Vasquez had 5 or 6 shots in that game, but I think the penalty was the only one that you could call on target. And so it was kind of a reverting back to what we had seen in the games previous.
when we get back to the league game in Cincinnati. So I think another thing I saw a lot of criticism about moving on to the weekend was this also feels like a bunch of Monday morning quarterbacking or coaching or whatever you call it in soccer. But a lot of folks thinking that Nico just set this team up to fail with this deployment of 5 at the back against Cincinnati, and particularly where everybody was, and we never had a chance. So, like, what? I know.
How so? Say more.
Well, like, for example, I can't remember where everybody is. Like, okay, so Buter's basically in the center of that, which with a guy that wants to get forward that much does not seem like the best place to be. You know, I saw this take that if you're going to play 3 at the back with your 3 center backs, you need more mobile guys. So maybe Heinzek and Svatak being the outside center backs, I guess, is maybe not the way to do it if you don't have Julio. So it's just the fact that Austin gave up an attack in a way that left them open in transition, I think was the belief as far as how the team is being set up.
I don't know. I don't know if I buy into any of that. Like, the 5 at the back is not necessarily more defensive, and I think the post-game press conference was Estevez and Gallagher, and they both kind of talked about just the way that Cincinnati lines up and the way they attack in transition, that having 3 deeper players would let you set up more there. So if the take is that they set up too defensively, also, like, do you want to just go toe to toe with one of the best teams in the league on the road? And is that not setting them up for failure too? Like, I'm totally fine with playing five in the back. Like, I think you can quibble with the guys on the field being the best players to do that, because a lot of them aren't, but it's the guys we have right now. And also, we've got a ton of games coming up, and I think Kolmanich specifically, like, is a guy who hasn't played a ton lately and is a guy who's been in decent form, relatively speaking. And so it's a way to get him on the field, to have maybe a slightly more solid, I get at least numbers deeper when defending deep. But I don't know. I'm not even saying that it worked, but I don't necessarily have a problem with the idea.
So if you were forced to give us one reason why things turned out in Cincinnati the way they did, what's your take on that? Like, why do, other than, I mean, obviously Cincinnati is better than Austin, but like, if there's something Austin could have done differently, what do you do?
I mean, be better at defense. It's like, and then also put shots on target. They didn't do either of those things particularly well. And some of the defensive part specifically, I think you could chalk up to strategy, but they had, I don't remember, it was double-digit shots, but only 2 of them on target the whole night. So that comes down again to the whatever this curse is that we have,
which we don't believe in.
Right. We'll get into that later. But
okay,
players not putting, like, I still believe they need more opportunities, but the opportunities that these very expensive, very talented players are getting, they're not doing the most that they could with them. So I would chalk up some of it to that as well.
So a little bit of failure, not a little bit. I would say more failure in execution than failure in how the club lined up as a starting 11.
Offensively, for sure. I'll get into, I have some problems with how Austin was pressing Cincinnati, and then the way that just the lack of awareness, I think, especially on that second goal, it's not that anybody told them to do those things wrong. They just weren't paying attention and did it bad.
Wait, you don't think Nico's coaching them to not pay attention? That's kind of crazy. And then I guess the other thing is, like, we touched on this, but man, there's no time to relax. So we've got Atlanta on Wednesday, Vancouver again on Sunday, Houston the next Wednesday, I think Minnesota again. Sorry, not Sunday, Saturday. So we got 2 Wednesday, Saturdays coming up. So, like, there's no time to rest for this club, which I think maybe sets up some of, like, to the point you said about you play 5 at the back because John Kolmanich has been decent and you didn't get time, and you've got some guys unavailable. What's the silver lining, or where can the silver lining be for you in terms of, like, what the next couple weeks look like given the current state of this team?
One of them is that Atlanta has been really bad. lately. One of the few teams with maybe more disappointing, expensive DPs and a worse run of form than Austin's in. That's one of them. The other is that we're hoping that Mikael Dessler will be back in the next week and a half or two. It would be ideal if he were back now, but he's not. But it's not out of the realm of possibility that he would be available as a sub within the next week. Is that silver enough for you?
No, I think it's the reality of what we have available. I mean, I think, for the cup match, it's next week's cup match. Houston hasn't been great either. So, and also probably is facing the same kind of schedule congestion. So maybe it's just in a war of attrition, Austin.
I'm hoping the Austin players will want to run that one back as well, with as disappointing and as frustrating as that Houston loss was, to get another chance very soon to kind of make that one right.
Totally. And like our good friends at Garwood's Consulting say, US Open Cup's all that matters. The
exactly.
Copenhagen is trash.
All right. Should we take a break, Jeremiah?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's take a break, and then we'll get into the details of the games from this week.
All right, let's do it.
When no one is around.
Moontower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FEF Law, the official injury lawyers of Boston FC.
FEF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education. And they have their own podcast called Summary Judgment. You can check it out wherever you get your podcasts.
You can go to FEF.law to find out what makes FEF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's FEF.law. Amplify Credit Union is a member-owned financial cooperative that served the needs of Central Texans for over 5 decades. As a credit union, Amplify has no shareholders or parent companies. That means more of your money stays in the community.
So last week I was at a fundraising event, and Stacey Armijo, the Chief Experience Officer at Amplify Credit Union, was the speaker on stage to introduce the keynote, and she started talking about FIFI ranking. And I was able to say, Amplify has been the home of FIFI ranking since 2022. Their free checking accounts come with 0 overdraft fees or minimum balances, which means you get more mileage from your everyday spending.
Amplify membership is open to any Texas resident. Learn to trust your bank again at Amplify Credit Union. To learn more and to register for free parking at the Amplify Esperanza branch on game day, go to www.goamplify.com/moontower-soccer. All right, we are back. Later on the show, we are going to talk about MLS's roster profiles that just dropped with an updated version recently. We're going to do our game previews, but first, we're going to cover the 2 matches from last week. We'll start with the US Open Cup win versus the El Paso Locomotive. We're going to get into the comeback. We already mentioned a little bit in the first segment, but let's start with the pregame narratives and what we were talking about before this game.
Yeah, and I think the number one thing that we were talking about is, which we've already mentioned, is with this run of games coming up in multiple competitions and hopefully multiple US Open Cup matches. And, more than effectively 2 a week the whole month of May, is we expected to see some rotation and a mixed roster. And so we got that for sure. We get Steph Cleveland in goal, which is kind of a sign at this point that there's a cup going on.
Yeah, and for folks who don't know, that's a pretty common thing to do. Is I think it's partially to rest your starting goalkeeper, but it's kind of a tradition and kind of like throwing your backup a bone, because backup goalkeepers rarely, sometimes never play. And so this is saying, hey, thanks for your work. You can go play this one.
Yeah, and Steph Cleveland particularly, I don't know exactly how many league matches he started, but this is not, somebody who's never seen the field. So in terms of pedigree, Austin is probably privileged to have a guy like that who is willing to just play US Open Cup matches and these other kinds of competitions and not demand a lot of playing time. We can talk about in practice with a couple of these goals where that actually worked out.
Yeah.
And I think one could debate whether the fact that he didn't have his best day is on him or just on rust, right? But yeah, definitely it's good to get for him to get a chance. In this one, we just talked about John Kolmanich a little bit. Not surprising to see him get some time. At fullback, you get Hindsight and Cascante or two of your three nailed-on starters. Gallagher is the only choice on the other side.
Also,
and then,
probably the fittest guy on the team.
Yes. And then this is where you see a little rotation. So we get Dubrsarski, Sabovic. I have a question about this formation. So I have it written as Dubrsarski, Sabovic, and Rubio. I think I saw it on FOTMob as a 4. I guess that was a 4-2-3-1, but I would be curious about like how you saw them play on the night. But Uzuni, Vasquez, and Aubrion across the top in some group of players.
Yeah, I don't think was so different from how we often line up with the 3-man midfield. I think if you think of Rubio as playing Owen Wolf's position, so he's the more attack-minded of the 2 8s. Sabovic is the slightly more defensive-minded of the 2 8s, and then Dubrsarski was the 6. And Sabovic would float back and kind of play next to Dubrsarski at times, but he had freedom to go forward. But Rubio is often the more attack-minded, Sabovic the more defense-minded.
And I'm going to say this because I believe it to be true. This is Dubrsarski's first start, right? It has to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he's only played some kind of last 20, 15 minutes or so before this.
So this is good. It shows the level of competition, but also a good chance to get some guys like this some meaningful playing time, which maybe with how things went in the first half didn't work out that great, although the second half rally would sort of allow the club to redeem itself. So do you want to maybe talk about just the first half overall?
I would also say, like, there's some teams in MLS for the Open Cup. I think Minnesota did like 10 short-term call-ups from their second team or something like that. I don't think there was any MLS players on their bench, and then a few second-team guys in the starting 11. And so there's various ways to do this. From what Austin had available, it looked like they were kind of rotating for rest's sake and not necessarily like saying play the kids. I think if Danny Pereira is healthy, Dubrsarski probably doesn't start this game.
I think that makes sense. And I feel like this way is a way that I like to see an Open Cup team lineup where you've got some rotation, but you've also got some of your best players on the bench and available should things go wrong, and you have to sub them in the second half. I feel like this is just from watching Liverpool. It's a very way that like Liverpool will leave Mohamed Salah on the bench for all the cup matches, but they've always got him like in case of emergency break glass. And I think that's what we see from Austin the second half of this one. Yeah,
and some really experienced players as well. Like Rubio doesn't start a lot, but very experienced player. Aubrion, the same thing. And so it's a team that should be able to beat a USL squad. Again, in practice, didn't necessarily come true.
Right. Well, let's talk about the first half, man. So we get two Beto Avila goals, one assisted and one unassisted.
Yeah, Austin starts this game off pretty strong. Looks like an MLS team playing a USL team. El Paso had some loose touches, some turnovers that turned into Austin chances. Austin created some of their own chances. Early on, there's the Jean Colemanich through ball to Uzuni. Beautiful pass. I think Uzuni is probably offside, but there's no VAR in this competition. But it kind of sets up what a lot of the first part of this game is going to look like, where we show our quality, show our superiority to the El Paso team, offensively at least, and then can't finish it. Uzuni's 1v1 with the keeper and just hits him right in the chest. Keeper does well. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but you'd bet on Uzuni in that matchup on paper at the very least. There's some Brandon Vasquez chances that don't go in. There's one, I think it's like in the 30th minute where it's a header. He does, again, the frustrating thing where he makes great moves, does really well to get himself open, and then can't put the shot on target. And he hits that one header off the crossbar. And I think at that point is when I turned to no, it was at halftime we were talking about that, I guess, when y'all came up. But I told Mike Corniola, like, I believe in curses now. I don't know what else to attribute this to.
Yeah, man. It was that poor guy. I mean, luckily he managed to finally unlock a little bit in the second half, and that we'll see how that plays out for the rest of the year. But he does end up this week with being on 3 goals and being by far the club's leader in goals scored. So
yeah,
maybe
it's
this
a
is where
weird
the turnaround
thing
starts.
to have that many goals and still be a disappointment.
Yes.
But yeah, talking about El Paso's goal. So leading up to that first one, like just before, there's a goal disallowed for offside. We foul them in our defensive half. They set up to play a set piece into the box, have a bunch of players forward. The player makes kind of an arcing run into the box at the near post in front of the wall. And they're able to just play a through ball to him into the box. You shouldn't be able to do that easily to begin with. It was way too easy. So he receives in the box, turns, takes a pop at the back post. I think he was probably shooting. It's a little bit off target, but they have a player running backside that slides in and pokes it in. Either I'll give the Austin defenders benefit of the doubt and say they held their line and kept him offside. There's also a non-0% chance that they didn't know he was there and he just crashed past them and would have scored if he were onside anyway. But luckily he was significantly offside and that one didn't count because of just the lack of focus, the lack of intensity to allow them to get the ball in that position so easily. And then to have that kind of set the tone for what was to come after that. Just after that, in the 19th minute, we're building out from the back. Savovic loses the ball in a really poor position. He's one of our deeper midfielders, and he loses the ball in our defensive half. Can't do that. El Paso recovers it. They start pushing towards goal. Gallagher steps to the ball to tackle it, but the ball kind of pinballs back off of the player and goes behind Gallagher to Beto Avila. Cascante steps to him, but we know he has the turning radius of a cruise liner. And so Avila kind of like looks to the overlapping run, but then just pokes the ball back inside and keeps running towards the goal. And Cascante is just toast at that point. He tries to catch up and challenge the shot, but he can't get there. Dubersarski is not quick enough to realize the line he should have taken and has to pull out of a challenge because he doesn't want to foul the guy in the box. And then Cascante can't recover fast enough, and Avila shoots it. Cleveland had kind of started shuffling to the far post because that's the way he was running, and Avila wrong-foots him by hitting into the near post, and it's a good little finish, but far too easy to get into the position to actually shoot there.
Yeah, man, and it's this is the kind of thing it shouldn't happen, sort of given the differences in the level of skill that you would expect from the different leagues, right? Like, doesn't seem like you should be physically beaten by, USL players unless you're just you shouldn't physically be beaten by them. So then it has to come down to the mental side of things, right? Like the choices you make, the sort of psyche that the individual players have. And it seems like that's what breaks down here. And some of what has continued to break down for Austin over this run over the last several games where they're allowing so many goals.
Yeah. And it reminds me a little bit of something we talked about after the Vancouver match where they beat us 5-1, where we had been so good defensively at that point. And in that game, it almost looked like the players thought that, okay, well, we've been really good defensively. We can tick that box. Goal achieved. We're done now. It's like, well, no, just because you know how to do it doesn't mean you can stop now. You still have to keep doing it. And that's kind of what this one felt like. It's like, well, no, we're an MLS team and they're USL, so we're better. It doesn't work that way. You still have to try. You still have to play with intensity and show them that you're better. You can't just coast through it. And that's what it looked like they were doing. And just to see them give up a goal because they weren't playing with intensity, it gets called offside. And then almost immediately give up another goal because they weren't playing with intensity. It was so infuriating. And so that Vasquez chance is kind of in between these two, but then they get that second goal. Austin wins the ball, counter pressing. They play the ball to Dubersarski, who kind of feels pressure coming. And he did that thing where he can feel a guy coming from behind, and he leaned into him to kind of like slingshot him away from the ball with that challenge, but he's so far away from the ball, and the El Paso player doesn't really get that much on him, so the ref doesn't call it. And I think you could have called it a foul, but I don't think it's a great injustice that he didn't. So El Paso picks it up. They play the ball forward to a central runner. It was Avila again. Super loose touch from Avila here. It's not like he was a world beater in this instance. A really loose touch that bounces towards Heinz Ike, and he just kind of throws his head down to hit it, but it's at an awkward height and he can't get much on it. And so it just bounces right back into Avila's path, and he gets a shot off. It's a little bit of a fortunate bounce there, but shouldn't have been able to get to that spot so easy. And then Cleveland probably could have done better there. It's a shot that, like, it's not a 10 out of 10 save, but for Brad Stuver, it's probably a 9 out of 10 save. Like 9 out of every 10 times he's going to get that one, but Cleveland doesn't stop it. But again, like the response in transition just felt so slow and so lethargic.
Yeah, and that was the one I was thinking about when I was mentioning earlier that I didn't feel like Cleveland had his best night. But to your point, there were many other things that had to go wrong for him to be put in that position, and they did there. And that was really the tale of the whole first half. And you want to, where do we see this comment? It feels like halftime was not full of love and joy like halftimes have been in the past, right?
Well, we should talk about what happened as the players were leaving the field at halftime.
Yeah.
I've heard boos in Q2 Stadium before when the team has been not playing great, but it's often when there's been some bad refereeing decisions or perceived bad refereeing decisions. And it seemed like at least 90% of any boos that have ever happened in Q2 were aimed at the ref. Maybe 10% were at the players, but it's never felt like that to me before. This half ended, and there's not a ton of people there. It's maybe, I don't know, 30 to 40% full, probably. But I would guess at least half of those people booed the players off the field when that whistle blew.
I think that is very true. Oh man, yeah, and that actually reminds me too. I feel like that was the emptiest that I've seen it for a game in terms of actual attendance. And maybe it's because it's like an Open Cup game that everybody got for free that's during the week. But from among the people who were there, I totally agree with that. And I maybe have always told Jackson Bentley in the past not to boo, and I did not take it upon myself to tell him to stop this time. Like
I was going to say, like, how do you feel about it? Because I'm normally a person who I don't like to boo players. I don't normally condone booing players. Like I don't know that it's helpful often. And also it's just kind of mean. In this scenario, as it started happening, I was like, they deserve this. They deserve it. And I think it's maybe what they need right now, because it's not I don't know, if they had one player who was just on a tear and had some fluky things happen or whatever, then I could say like, okay, this is a little harsh, but it was 90% because they were not sharp. They were not focused. Were playing with no intensity against the team they should be beating handily.
Yeah. And this goes back to what we were talking about the San Antonio game away in 2021, where people were very, very frustrated because they were like playing as if they were the better team, and talent-wise and things should just come to them. They played lackadaisical, and I felt like it was the same in the first half against El Paso.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I was resigned to a loss at this point, and like had gotten past anger by that point. I was just like, I hope the players feel embarrassed, and hopefully that can turn into something better down the road. Maybe we can pull this back and get a draw and take it to extra time or whatever. But I didn't have any faith in that, because why should we? They've not scored goals in any game ever. Why are they going to do it in this one when they're playing the worst I've ever seen them play? But apparently, according to some of the players talking to various media folks after the game, it was not the most congenial locker room talk, and the players were speaking very candidly and honestly with each other about how they should maybe be doing better. And we talked about Estevez being the good cop. Do we think like that's what this team needs? Do they need a bad cop? I don't even know if that's not who Estevez is, maybe it shouldn't be him. Maybe doing it unnaturally isn't useful, but it seemed like the kick in the butt helped them in this game. Do we need somebody to be doing that more often?
I do think that somebody needs to do that, and somebody needs to do that when they can do it in the right way, right? Like, if you just had somebody who's just being a jerk for the sake of being a jerk, like that's not helpful. But I mean, for all his faults, like I feel like Alex Ring is the kind of guy that would kick people in the butt, but was also out there leaving everything on the line. And he could play bad cop because he had the credibility to play bad cop, and he was coming from a place of like he had earned it. And so there's only, and I think Julio was one of the guys that did it. Like, there's very few people in this club right now that have sort of earned the ability and the respect to be able to do that, and for it to be in a way that the team reacts. But if the coach isn't going to do it, somebody needs to, and it seems like that's what happened in this match.
Yeah, so they come back out halftime. There's 2 changes at halftime, which are Robert Taylor comes in for Rubio and Bukhari comes in for Obrion. And so it starts looking a little bit better in the first half. Austin has more energy. They're getting into better spots. It's looking a bit more like those first 10 or 15 minutes, but still not able to get the final ball, to get the shot on target, to like push it over the line. And also still just letting El Paso play too easily in certain moments. They open themselves up in transition a few times, which, okay, that's going to happen when you're chasing a game sometimes. But there's times when guys would just be driving with the ball at our back line with nobody really to pass it to, and our back line is on skates moving backwards, and then it lead to them getting a shot off. I'm like, come on. Like, again, if you can't be cocky and giving them too much respect at the same time. Like, it's almost like they were afraid of them at that point and giving them too much space on the ball, but also thought they were too good to try in the first half, apparently. So it's a really bizarre, like, scenario for these guys at that point. But finally, 73rd minute, these goals come, and they come quick. They're all within 8 minutes, right?
Yeah, they are. Well, I think one of the big things that before that is you get the second group of subs, which is
that's right.
Owen, Ilie, Biru come on, and I feel like we can talk about this an hour later, but like Owen Wolf has a very impactful 30 minutes, which you will see in the stat sheet, but he continues to, in moments, be the most special player Austin has, and I think you can see this leading into the first of those 3 goals when he gets the assist on the Brendan Vasquez goal.
Yeah, Owen. We'll talk a lot about him, but Biru also involved in 2 of the 3 goals, not as directly as Owen, I don't think, but still involved in them. And so, yeah, those definitely made a difference there. So the first one, 73rd minute, the ball gets played to Vasquez's feet, and it kind of gets poked away from him in between his legs. Biru fights to push up and win the loose ball and recycles the offense with a little poked pass up to Owen. Owen turns, plays a little hopping through ball perfectly into Vasquez's path as he runs back into the box, and a cool little poke finish past the keeper. So that's one. At that point, I'm a little bit like, okay, well, at least we got that. Like, at least it's something.
Not embarrassing.
And it was good. It was a really good goal. Great pass by Owen. Good run from Vasquez. Good finish from Vasquez. 3 minutes later, the next one comes. Biru plays a long ball over the top to Vasquez. He chests it down right on the edge of the box. Uzuni is kind of trailing behind him, and the knockdown from Vasquez is good enough that Uzuni's able to take one touch and then hit it, and he whips it far post around a defender and past the keeper. And these are finishes, when I'm watching tape of him in Spain, that it seems like he's doing once a game, and just hasn't happened here. And so it was refreshing to see, okay, big striker Vasquez, good at hold up play. He makes a good run, stretches that back line out, knocks the ball down, and the space that he left behind him is where Uzuni picks up the ball, and then Uzuni finishes like we've seen him do elsewhere. Really good to see that too. Okay, now we have a ball game. Maybe we can knock him out in extra time at this point. But then we get another one in the 80th minute. El Paso looks gassed at this point. Most of their players are unable to run anymore. So Owen finds himself with a ton of space in the midfield. So he receives in in kind of that standard 8 position half space, turns, nobody's there. So he just starts running towards goal. No one ever steps to him. And by the time he gets near the goal, we have 4 guys running into the box and only 3 defenders there, I think, or 4 defenders versus the 5 Austin players, if you're including Owen there. And so Julio Cascante is running up the backside. He has a ton of space at the far post. Vasquez is hanging around the penalty spot waiting for action. Owen punches like a head high cross. I'm not entirely sure he wasn't trying to get it back to the far post to Cascante, because that seemed like the more open pass, but whatever he was doing, it finds Vasquez. He's able to connect to it, gets a really strong header on it, and pushes it past the keeper to complete the comeback and eventually get the victory for Austin. It wasn't quite over there. We gave El Paso a couple more chances at that point, but we're able to hold on and get the victory.
Yeah, and I think that, well, I don't know how much you want to talk about Owen Wolf now or like later, but
we can save it because we're going to do it more for the next game.
Okay. I just want to say in this one, the difference in the mentality that he brings from what we've talked about Austin feeling like they should be the better team and somehow the game, El Paso should be gifted to them. And then the way that Owen like takes charge of this game and takes charge of moments, that it was really like a game changer for the whole team. And the fact that he wasn't sitting back, like he was attacking, he was being aggressive and helped drive everybody to do that. And that's not something we saw at all in the first 60 minutes.
Yeah. And you can chalk some of that up to legs, but also it's just who he's been this year, where he has been aggressive in a way that he really hasn't been in years past. And we'll talk about more of that in the Cincinnati game. Jeremiah, anything else we need to hit before we take a break?
No, it's just we've sort of teased the fact that Austin has a heavily congested schedule, and the one thing we found out is that with the U.S. Open Cup draw, there is a match at home against Houston on May 21st, so that's next Wednesday night. So just everybody keep that one in mind, and we can talk about what that means just for the overall health of the club and availability and guys we need to see more from when we get to that point when we're talking about games in the future.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be back with those pieces of news we referenced earlier and then also talk through the Cincinnati game.
We would like to remind everyone that May 15th is the last day for homeowners to protest their property taxes. You don't need to have all the details of the protest figured out. You just need to file the protest in time. If you would like to protest your property taxes and need some help with their valuation, you can contact broker Eric Wilson.
But that's not all Sage Wilson can help you with. Their team of experts can also help with everything from waterfront luxury living to commercial office space to apartment rentals. To obtain Sage real estate advice here in Austin, talk to our friends at Sage Wilson Realty.
And don't forget, Sage Wilson Realty is giving away 2 tickets to an upcoming match. You can enter your chance to win for free tickets on our website. Our premier sponsor is McGuire Woods Consulting, helping clients in the public affairs space from lobbying at the local, statewide, and federal levels to digital and communication campaigns across the country.
McGuire Woods Consulting has offices in 10 MLS cities, but is proud to support Moon Tower Soccer and Austin FC because we're going to win the Open Cup, which is the best trophy in America. Contact our friends at McGuire Woods Consulting at mwcllc.com for more information. All right, we are back. We're going to recap the away loss in Cincinnati. After this Open Cup game, I think we were all hoping that maybe that second half and just kind of the way that the whole El Paso game went in general, we talked about the players maybe needing a kick in the butt, that maybe it was kind of the best possible outcome where they got embarrassed, but also were still able to come back and win the game. So we're embarrassed and also maybe gain some confidence at the same time. And I think we're all hoping that they can carry that forward in MLS play. That being said, away at one of the best defensive teams in the league, one of the best teams, period, in the league, is probably not the best place to go start that new era, is it?
It's definitely not. And I guess ultimately, I think I mentioned this last week, like I had a lot of emotion yesterday about how things went. But on the face of it, when you look at, it was a 2-1 loss to the third place team in the East. Until 76 minutes in, it's a 1-1 match. Like Austin's in a position to steal a point in a way away. Like then none of the stats are super overwhelming. I mean, yes, Cincinnati more possession, more shots on target, but like their chances weren't great. Like basically these teams end up tied on like X goals. So it's an expected outcome and a disappointing outcome at the same time.
Yeah, I think context is important to this one because in a vacuum, a hard-fought 2-1 loss where it's a combination of a couple of mistakes and one of the best players in the league beating you, that's not a super disappointing outcome. I think it's the fact that it's another game where Austin can't score in open play, another game where just some like mistakes in really easy spots kind of lead to that, and in a run where Austin has just not looked very good in quite a few matches.
Yeah, I think that broader context is really what's important. So maybe let's the week leading up to the game, or the few days leading up to the game, one thing was that Taylor had picked up a little bit of a knock in the El Paso game. Everybody was wondering whether he would be out. It looks like he's going to be out for a couple weeks. So this is a team that is somewhat thin on frontline talent going into a long run of matches now being more thin, which means Austin's going to, down the road, have to rely on players that haven't played as much more. We do get the Irvin Torres short-term call-up. Does he make the match day roster? I assume he does, but
he did, yeah. And that's the thing we forgot to mention the El Paso game is Open Cup rosters are smaller. You have 2 fewer players. So CJ Fodre and Riley Thomas were not even on the Open Cup roster. And it's just a matter of, okay, who's flexible to play in multiple positions? Who do we need? Who do we think we're going to use? And those guys didn't make it. But then you lose Taylor. You're still missing Dessler. You're still missing Danny. Going to Cincinnati, they had those 2 guys back on the roster, but still had an open spot. And so that's why Irvin gets the call up here.
Yeah. And then lineup wise, we kind of talked about this. So this is what would you describe as a 5-3-2, I guess, or more or less, right?
I think that's right.
The guys we talked about, if you're going to go 5 at the back, we've basically got, I guess we got 6 choices because you could have had Julio Cascante at one of these, but Kolmanich, Hindsight, Beaterus, Vatak, Gallagher at the back, Savovich, Sanchez, and Wolf in the midfield, and Vasquez and Uzuni up front. Not that surprising. I think these are part of the rotation of like 12 or 13 guys you're going to see over the next few weeks because that's who Austin has available. Just talk about the flow of the game, particularly kind of early on, where again Austin didn't seem that bad. Like there was some definite runs where Austin, had the momentum before the first goal, a little bit after the first goal, but just can't seem to put together the pieces in a way that will make a difference.
Yeah, they looked fine for a while, and then throughout the game, Cincinnati would have these stretches where they would get into our final third and just kind of be turning the screws at that point. The first goal comes not super late in the game. I guess it was the 12th minute, so fairly early. And this is one where Cincinnati breaks our press. And this is one of the things, I referenced this in the first segment. This is one thing I didn't really like in this game where we're playing 5 at the back, but we're still pressing fairly aggressively and playing quite high at times, but it wasn't super effective. And they were able to play through it a little too easily at times. This is just my opinion, but I'd honestly rather them just go back to what they were doing early, play that really tight mid-block defense and be hard to play through. But instead, when they're pressing high like this, if you're not doing it well, it ends up hurting you and you just open yourself up to pressure even more. So Cincinnati breaks Austin's press. Savovich is able to get in the line of a pass from Yakubo, but he ends up scuffing the clearance and it just goes right back to Cincinnati. So in that moment, Ilie had been tracking Evander through the midfield, but as he sees the ball going towards Savovich, he stays wide as if to say, like, I'm going to be here in case we win this. Like when we win this ball, I'll be in a good position to go try to win the clearance. But whenever that doesn't happen and Cincinnati gets the ball back, Evander has continued his run and goes all the way up to the top of the box. Engel has the ball wide and hits the ball to Evander at the top of the box. Nobody ever spots Evander. Nobody goes and marks him there. As he receives the ball, Svatak tries to step to him, but kind of runs into Santos on his way. And I don't know if he was going to get there in time anyway, but Evander, when you give him the ball in that moment, like a lot of players are going to probably do well from that spot with no pressure on them, but Evander especially is not going to miss. And he punished us for it.
Yeah, he does. It's funny. I was like just reading through the FOTMob game recap, and I was like, "Who's this Fanatic guy?" And I don't remember him being so good. And it's because that's Evander's.
Oh yeah,
actually, yeah. That's the other half of Evander's name, which he doesn't always need.
So Sabovic fluffs that clearance. This isn't the most egregious thing that he's done, but I'll take the opportunity to maybe criticize him here a little bit. There's been moments in several of the last games where he gets tired and isn't running as hard as he should be, and that leads to not necessarily directly to a goal, but putting the opposite team in a position where they can be dangerous. And so in the Houston game late on, he's gassed and doesn't track a guy, doesn't run super hard, and they end up getting a shot wide open from the top of the box. In that El Paso game, he gives up that ball far too easily in a really vulnerable spot where they turned and we were in trouble as soon as they got the ball there. In this one, he fluffs this chance, and there's some other moments where it just a little bit of like casualness, nonchalance, either with his running or with how risky he's being with the ball, or a lack of being clean on the ball, that is becoming a liability at times. And I think as the game went on, he kind of settled into it and was a pretty useful kind of tempo setter in the midfield, passing the ball around. But there's other moments where he was not helpful. And it's often those like intensity moments defensively where you can't just run whenever you're in trouble. You kind of have to be pushing and running all the time so that you don't get in trouble. And I think those are the things that I'm starting to be a little bit worried about him with, where he's going to try when he wants to and maybe save his energy for doing the things that he wants to do.
Yeah, so not to make you his sports psychologist, but he does seem to have all the talent in the world, right? And you've seen film of the things that he can do well and does do well, and we see flashes of that. I mean, is this fixable? Do you think it's just he's like doesn't appreciate the level of play, or like is he in situations he's not normally in, or do you have sort of a take on what we need to do to get the best out of Sabovic?
So I watched this game with me and Ashley watched with Mike and Steph the other night, and was talking to Mike about this. I think one thing is kind of the Danny Pereira problem, where if Sabovic is part of a complete midfield around him where he can just be an out and out 8 and play that role, where he's not having to create everything. He's also not having to be the main defensive presence in the midfield, that I think it would set him up a little better. But I don't think that can excuse everything. I think part of it's the heat. He seems to be really affected by the heat. He's also just kind of he's a bigger guy. Like for a midfielder, he's a pretty big body. And I think his cruising speed is not bad, but it takes him a bit to get there. And it seems like he's aware of his energy reserves and is afraid of using too much all at once.
He's saving himself for some point that might never come. Okay. And yeah, heat's sure. It's not going to be a problem at all. Come once 104 on Wednesday night.
There's another big Cincy chance in the 19th minute. Sloppy Kolmanich clearance falls straight to Evander. He hits the ball with Stuver off his line, and luckily it hits the post. And then Beer is able to get in the way of the rebound off of that one, but almost gave up a really easy one there. I'll get to halftime, and I mean, I didn't feel terrible about how Austin was doing. I didn't feel great about how they were doing either, but I didn't feel terrible about it. And so we come out from halftime and almost immediately get that penalty. There's a really nice stretch of possession in the attacking half, mostly like an Owen Wolf centric stretch that leads to him playing Gallagher in behind. Gallagher hits a cross that hits Teenage Hidebi's arm in the box. Vasquez takes the ball, goes up to take the penalty. Doesn't look super confident standing at the spot there. And the penalty isn't like if the keeper goes that way, there's a decent chance he saves it, but he does hit it the other way and gets it in. So it counts. It's encouraging to see that kind of possession leading up to that there, but it's not very encouraging that the penalty is the only way we can score in this game. Owen Wolf was a monster in this game. He was so good when they could get the ball to his feet, evading defenders, opening up space, moving the ball. He was really, really good at that. But he and the rest of this team is still not always finding that last ball into the box to get really high percentage chances. And then the few moments that we do, the forwards are still not always taking advantage of those. So Owen is, I kind of think we've talked about Owen playing in that half 10 role. He's not fully playing as like a free 10 floating wherever he wants. I kind of think we should play with him that way and get the ball to his feet as often as possible. Is he going to do the same stuff Evander does? No, he's not that player. He's not as good as that player. And it doesn't have that final ball that players like Evander has, but he's the best we got. And I think that at this point, give him the ball, see what he can do, see if he can make some magic and open up some space. And I think that's maybe our best chance at getting more chances, even if it's not the best chance imaginable. It's the best chance we've got.
There's used to be this game I played. I think it was a golf game on the computer, and it was you would take a shot, and the guy would be like, "You can't ask for a shot better than that." I mean, many people could, but you couldn't. And I feel like that's kind of what you're doing. Like, are there other like playmaking 10s that are better in this league than Owen? Yes. Are they wearing an Austin FC jersey? Absolutely not. And it's kind of funny now. Like, this is a guy that's sort of settled in the midfield at least, but it's still like he's a little bit too much of a Swiss Army knife to be as effective as he might be for this team, which again speaks to like the beauty of his flexibility. But also maybe like settle him into a spot, especially maybe somebody comes this summer that changes that. But for now we're 12 games in. Now we're sort of probably past the point of experimenting, or we should be past the point of experimenting. Like, go with the guy who gives you the best chance to create more opportunity and the guy that seems like the best to create connection among the talent on the front line, because that still seems to be the things that's missing, right? These pieces are not complementary, and Owen seems to be the person who's the most likely to be able to help make that happen in the best way possible for this team.
Yeah, one last note on Owen. If he continues playing like he has the last couple of games and just this season period, frankly, but I've said like Austin shouldn't be in a rush to sell him unless a really big number comes. If he can string together another 5 or 8 performances like he did in Cincinnati, that big number might come this summer and not next summer, like I was kind of thinking it might.
And I would prefer it to come next summer, but I don't think you ever, just for the sake of this team and the roster build, but I don't think there's any way that you pass it down if it comes, because it may never come again. And it's the best thing for him. And it's the best thing for the club and future recruitment to this club to be a team that sells players into Europe for a bunch of money.
Yeah, for sure. So again, Austin's able to create some stuff, getting some pretty good balls in the box, getting into some good crossing positions, but just unable to get that final ball. And then Cincinnati has another one of their big stretches where they're in our attacking third for what feels like ages. And so they finally get that goal, and we'll talk about what leads up to the goal and like who's to blame and what went wrong. But they had so many chances in this little 10-minute stretch that it seemed like they were bound to score eventually. It's almost a miracle they didn't score. And Stuver comes up really big a handful of times throughout this game. Otherwise, it could have been a worse result than what it ended up being. So that second goal comes in the 76th minute. Again, after this long, sustained stretch of Cincinnati chances. Oriano has the ball wide right. He hits a big switch to Lucas Engel, the opposite wingback on the left side. Gallagher turns to go close him. Kevin Denke, their huge, like, giant presence of a striker, is making a near post run. So our two center backs go with him. Evander is off on that side, so nobody's on him because he's far off the ball. But as the two center backs are following Denke into the box, Evander just kind of hesitates just inside the penalty box, and Engel's able to cut it back to him and find the ball there. Svatak does well to kind of step to him pretty quickly and gets into his face. When you look, like, take a freeze frame there, it seems like everything in the box is fairly well covered. But then Evander hits, like, scoops this ball with the outside of his foot. It's taking this weird floating arc that looks like it's going to land right on Biru's forehead. And I think Biru thinks it's going to land on his forehead. But it ends up, like, drifting in a way that catches Biru off guard, makes no contact with it. And you have Valenzuela, one of their subs, is crashing that far post. Nobody's tracking him. Nobody even sees him. And when Biru misses, he's there and it lands on his foot and he smashes it into the net.
Yeah, I think this is just like, this one is maybe they're a victim of circumstance. It just seems like another team breakdown to me.
This has been the, like, kind of the center of what I view as kind of almost like a pedantic debate that I'm not accusing anyone. I've been part of it, but this, like, something that Estevez said in the post-game press conference about, like, Phil West asked about leaving Evander unmarked, and Estevez said, well, he was marked in that one. And I think some people took that as him, like, trying to candy coat it or lying about something. Like, what did you see there? Because I kind of agree with Estevez here.
I don't agree with them. I don't agree with them here. Like, I don't know. Maybe I've just seen too many camera angles from people that sort of have the same take as me on whether he was marked or not that make it seem like he's floating pretty free, in the moment. And honestly, like, Evander's going to beat you whether you mark him or not at some point. But man, I don't know. He looked pretty open from the edge of the box to ping balls into whoever was available in space from my vantage point.
Yeah, this is cutting hairs here. I'll explain the nerdy unimportant. Like, it doesn't matter. Honestly, it doesn't matter.
Well, none of it does. But yeah, but give us the nerdy point, because he looked unimpeded in space to me.
He was in that moment because the ball's on the far side. Evander, if you go back to when Oriano receives the ball at the right side, Evander is on the far side of the field walking. And so you could say, like, oh, he's so good, you should have someone on him all the time. But Cincinnati's so good that, like, if he's on the far side of the field in a spot where he can't really receive the ball and immediately be dangerous, if you pull someone off of that strong side to go mark him there, Cincinnati's good enough that they're probably just going to beat you with the guys on the strong side without Evander there. And so, yeah, you could say have him there all the time, but you're giving up other things if you do that. And so I would say, again, Jean Kolmanich steps to Oriano as he receives it, and Sabovic is there as well. They probably give him a little too much time on the ball. They allow him to make that big switch. It's a really accurate switch, so Engel is able to take action immediately. The center backs both have to, so you handle the immediate threat, which is Kevin Denke crashing the near post. You have to take that first. So they run with him. They cut it back to Evander. Again, would it be ideal to have someone near Evander all the time? Yes, but in practice, you kind of have to, in defending, there's almost always somebody open. And it happened to be him at that point. They close him down pretty quickly. Most players in that scenario, what Svatak did is enough to say, like, okay, I did my job. We're done here. But it's Evander. And so he hits that ball. Where my beef here is Biru misreading the ball, I feel like we've talked about him doing that multiple times where if you're going to win it, win it. If you're not going to win it, turn and face up the guy behind you who's going to. And several times in the last couple of years, he's whiffed on those and then left us out to dry. And so that happens there. Also, Valenzuela is running right next to Jean Kolmanich. Kolmanich stops and just stands there as that ball is played. Valenzuela runs past him and buries it. Those are the two guys I'm mad at here. I think the backside guys did fine. Maybe not perfect, but they did fine.
Well, I think that's maybe where the point, at the top that I've seen the criticism on the back five is that we have Biru in the middle of the back five. You're putting in a position to have to do a thing he's not very good at, and that's just where he fails in this moment. Although I don't know, it's not a static lineup. Maybe it's not. That's not exactly where he is all the time. But do you have Julio Cascante there? Maybe he does something different. Maybe it's a different set of choices. I mean,
he's taller. Maybe he wins a header, but then we're talking about other moments where Biru was pushing forward pretty aggressively at times and was being able to be part of the attack. Like, you don't want Julio pushing too high up in those moments. So it's, if you get super granular, like maybe there's a right answer there, but there's a wrong answer somewhere else that turns into. And so again, this is why I think this argument's kind of dumb, because they did a bad job. And I think Nico trying to spin that positively makes it sound like he's saying, no, they didn't do a bad job. And I think he's almost being a pedantic nerd like myself and saying, no, they did a bad job, but in a different way than what you're saying.
Right. I'm going to dismiss that specific instance, and just ignore the other bad things. And I think that's what a lot of the criticisms comes down to, is maybe just the overall response to things like this and not maybe exactly in that moment.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that also just chalks up to us losing, because if he said, oh yeah, they messed up, they should have done better, then people feel like, oh, he's throwing the players under the bus, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, there's no right answer when you're losing is the moral of the story here.
Yeah. So that to say, now Austin sits 3 straight league losses, 8th in the West. Just a few games ago, because this conference is so tight. A few games ago, Austin's near the top. Like, you have a few bad weeks, Austin's sinking, and like it's a tough month ahead. Hopefully they've turned it around a little bit. But before we get into the preview for this week, is there anything else you wanted to say about the Cincinnati game?
Let's maybe discuss Bukhari real quick, because we haven't really said his name in either of these games. Came in as a sub in the El Paso one at halftime. Came in, I think, around the 80th minute. Was dangerous in this game to a degree, where they were finding him on that right hand side. He was cooking guys and getting into open space to put in crosses. But part of it is FC Cincinnati has a really strong back line with 3 big talented center backs. 4 really, because Matt Miazga goes down and Hidebe comes in. And he's pretty good too. He's not as good as those other 3, but he's a great 4th center back to have on your roster. And so they cut out a lot of stuff and just did really well to handle balls in the air. But other times, Bukhari, at least twice, cooks a guy, gets to the inline, and puts in a ball that just is nowhere near anybody. And so it's just frustrating to see him do one thing so well and feel so encouraged, and then immediately have your hopes dashed by the end product, which is kind of how all of our attackers have been playing.
Yeah, right. I was going to say that's not unique to, I guess, the way that he doesn't connect and doesn't lead to succeed is unique from the others, but they all suffer from generally the same problem in the aggregate.
Yeah. Let's move on to previewing these other 2 games. Actually, do you want to hit some news real quick?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do this, because on May 8th, the Major League Soccer released their updated club roster profile. So I think this year's the first year where they've given this a level of detail, right, on player status, contract status, availability, roster designation, stuff like this. So
yeah, did they maybe do it towards the end of last year? But anyway, it's new, where they're telling us anything who's a TAM player, how much GAM is available, how long people's contracts are was not always a given. And now they're giving us this sheet with all of this stuff on there, which is really cool. But what we learned from this is kind of the main thing, because it's not a lot changed, but the GAM totals that were available, essentially what we learned here is that we used almost all of this year's remaining GAM on that Robert Taylor trade. And so we used everything we have this year and then some of what we'll have for the next 2 years on that. But all that said is all that GAM is gone now. So we can't really be using GAM anymore. But another thing we learned is that Julio Cascante is still our only TAM player. We'll find out soon, probably after roster compliance, we usually get the MLSPA salary drop. And so once we get that, we'll have a pretty good idea. And we'll learn some salaries that we don't know yet from some of the newer guys. And we'll have a better picture of what this whole roster builds and how much we might have left to spend. But what we do know is we've got 2 senior roster spots, 2 international roster spots, and then only 1 TAM player, that being Julio Cascante, where he does not make much over that max budget charge level. So we're using very little of our TAM at this point, which means there's a really good chance this summer we could be bringing in 1, if not 2, TAM players to round out this roster.
Yeah, and that's always been the hopeful fan fiction version of what Austin's doing this year. And we talked, I think, maybe even as recently as last week, or if not then the week before, about what we might want to do with those. But yeah, so to know the 2 international slots, both senior slots, and there seems to be a fair amount of TAM available to sign those players, leads one to believe that if the deals are right, hopefully Roto's cooking and already has those in the can, that this team is a little bit different in the summer. Although again, the season's 2/3 over by then, how much impact will they have? Who knows? But in terms of a long-term roster build, there's some flexibility to add some players and make this team better.
And if we can stay in the playoff hunt, then they potentially could be around long enough to actually make a difference this year. But it's harder for sure.
Yeah, it is. So let's talk about Wednesday nights. You teased on this when we were talking about the maybe the things to look for that are positive out of this run of games in May. So Atlanta United comes to town on Wednesday. Atlanta's 14th in the East. I think they were winless in their last 6 matches. They allowed a lot of goals. Austin was the only previous matchup, and I don't even remember why this was, but what this was for. But Avocado Logan got thrown out of Mercedes-Benz Stadium for a year.
Oh yeah, I was at that game.
Oh, you were at that game. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think Felipe Martins maybe came on as a sub or started and just had the game of his life. He played out of his mind that game. And I think that's part of why he became so beloved to the fan base, to an extent that maybe wasn't warranted by his body of work on the field. But the poop housing and the personality off, combined with this game alone, definitely did him a lot of favors.
Was enough, yeah. We talked about, so they signed Latte Loth from Middlesbrough, right? I think one of, if not the biggest signings in the history of Major League Soccer. And he's dangerous. He has 5 goals on the season to lead the team. Miguel Almiron comes back. He's been, honestly, better than I remembered just looking at his numbers. I don't remember hearing a lot of his name, but he's got 3 goals and an assist. But still, this is a team that spent a bunch of money and has not really gotten the results I think they would probably expect out of it, given where they sit in the table.
Yeah, it seems like a team that is, they have some big parts, but the whole is less than the sum of their parts at the moment. Not quite gelling, not looking like a cohesive unit. And then some questions about Ronnie Dyla, their coach, being on the same page with his players and whether or not he's really using them in the right way, or if they're listening to anything he's saying at times.
Yeah, which is really early in the season for a guy that's new to the job to have that. So, yeah, he says, Dyla said, this is because we did get this, I guess, midweek or opening week press conference today because of the game on Wednesday. Says he asked the squad for a few things: accountability, communication, and consistency. He says they're going to make changes. I think this is the good cop, bad cop thing, where I guess he's going to try to play both parts of this. And so this quote is, there's a line between being demanding and also loving. I think those 2 things are difficult in these kinds of period. It's the that's most important. What's done is done. So I think he's trying to hold this line of, being loving his team, but also demanding more of them, which is a little bit different approach than we've heard of Nico. And I would say neither one of them are working amazing so far. So maybe we shouldn't make any judgment about which approach is the best.
Yeah, and I don't know that there is one best approach. I think there's the right approach for the right person in the right moment. But if you have a coach who's incapable of being bad cop, will it come across as disingenuous to try it? And if that's not the right guy for that moment, I don't know. There's a lot of psychology involved here. And I don't think it necessarily needs to be Nico, but like you said before, maybe one of the players, maybe an assistant coach. I could imagine Davey Arnaud wouldn't mind yelling at someone every once in a while. Maybe some of the new Spaniards can do it. I don't know the answer, but it seems like the way they responded at El Paso that it might do this group of Austin players some good.
Well, I think on the Austin side of things, what do you expect that we'll see different from Saturday when we look at that? I mean, and I guess this always comes with the caveats that we are not in the sports high performance department. We have no idea who's who looks like they've been run ragged, who still has that spark to them. I would expect that, I'm guessing especially for a guy like Bukhari now, who has not played as many minutes, over the last week, is probably somebody you would see that's fresh. You feel like a young guy like Owen can probably go, no matter what at this point. But, what else should we expect to see out of this team?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. Nico keeps the answer he keeps giving to when he's asked about rotation with all these games is that we're going to play the best 11 for that game. And I wish he would expand upon that a little more to know exactly what he's talking about. But I think what he's saying is, okay, we just played this game. Leading up to this one, we're going to take account of who's fit, how long can people go, and decide based on that information what is the best 11 we can put on the field. Because the way he said it, I think, can be interpreted as we're going to play our best 11 every game. This FIFA starting 11 that is on the page whenever you start a new game, that's who we're going to play. I don't think that's what he means. I think he's saying, okay, these guys played X number of minutes, and probably shouldn't be asked to go 75 tonight. So we're not going to start that guy. I think that's what he means, but we don't know that information. We're not the sports scientists. We don't have the data from their little sports bra tracking device. So I don't know the answer, but I think it's going to be a lot of information used based on those things to decide who gets to go.
Yeah. And I've kind of taken that to mean that we're going to take this one game at a time and then really evaluate after each match. And I feel like sometimes with Josh Wolf previously, it would be okay, we're going to take a look at this week and we're going to sort of play, half our starters on Wednesday and half our starters on Saturday and kind of combine that. And it feels like it really is coming off Saturday, we're going to look at the best 11 for Wednesday. Coming off Wednesday, we're going to look at the best, all the data again so not really looking ahead, right? But taking it what in the moment seems like the best team to pick up a result. And
kind of rotating piece by piece as to, keep some continuity, some consistency, maybe some chemistry with certain guys, and then, not making wholesale changes, but just making small changes here and there as you need to.
Yeah, and I think for this club that's lost 3 in a row, this one against a team that's on a bad form on a Wednesday night is one that if this year is going to be any kind of success, if they're going to stay close to the playoff line, this is one that Austin needs to pick up a victory by any means necessary.
Absolutely. This is what Andrew Wiebe would have called in 2022 a bonus game. This is the definition. A struggling team from the other conference coming to your house. This is free points where you're their points don't count towards your table, essentially. So again, in context is everything. In a different situation, this game doesn't mean as much. But in this situation, I think it's very important for Austin to go out and get a result here.
And in this situation, particularly given Saturday night, Vancouver's coming to town, if you're going to pick up points this week, the Wednesday night match is probably the time to do it. Although stranger things have happened other than Austin getting some kind of a result against Vancouver. But, man, Saturday looks like a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, Vancouver has not slowed down. It looked like LAFC, who has kind of been their bogey team, they've not had any success against LAFC the whole time they've existed pretty much. They go down at home to LAFC in the 2-0 in the first half. They end up coming back and tying that 2-2. And so when it looked like maybe they're going to stumble and look bad, they still were able to fight back and preserve a point there. So I would also say like maybe they're going to come and not be able to handle the heat, but I don't think our players can handle the heat either. So
Right.
It's going to be a high of 104, 105 on Wednesday. They pushed that one back, so it's going to be a little cooler, but still very hot. To the extent that like it's hot in Atlanta too, so those guys are going to be used to it. But I mean, it's going to affect everyone. So if we're looking at the energy levels from when Austin went to Vancouver, I'd still say Vancouver has a good 30% advantage on us, that if they can just burn through those reserves, they're still going to probably have more energy than us. So I'm not going to be leaning on the Heat to be our friend necessarily.
Yeah, I think it's very fair. I was looking for reasons to be excited, and I was like, oh, Ryan Gall's out, but Ryan Gall was out the first match.
He hasn't played this whole year, pretty much.
Yeah, it didn't matter. Really, Brian White's pretty good too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we are as like lack sharpness and focus in the box the way we have the last couple of games, Brian White's going to score a hat trick on us again. He's going to score 4 on us again. Like he's so good. His movement's so good in the air, so good at getting onto the end of balls that we can't have an off play, not even an off game. We can't have an off play. He's going to punish you. And so we'll see how Austin can respond to playing so many games, how they can respond to what happened in these last 2 games. And I don't know the answer, but we're getting to a point where like it's not early anymore. Like we're getting into the meat of the season where what you see now is kind of what you are.
Yeah, and it's the grind, and it's the grind for everybody. So Austin has no excuse to not. It's like they're not playing these games in a vacuum. They're not the only team playing in the Heat. They're not the only team playing multiple matches per week. So it's like they have to stand up and whatever sort of structural integrity that the team had that led them to win a bunch of low-scoring games before this Vancouver match sort of blew things open. Like hopefully Austin could go back and find that, or otherwise it's gonna be a bad week.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we have covered everything we need to. It's going to be hot one on Wednesday, but it will be my green hairs Q2 debut. So if you see a bearded man with bright green hair, come say hi. What else, Jeremiah? I think that's all. Yeah.
I think that covers it. I think if for some reason you didn't know what Landon looked like before, there will be no doubt. We see him around, and just generally to say, I don't think people have a lot of problems with that, but every once in a while I will talk to somebody that's like, oh, I think I saw you a week ago or whatever, and I wasn't sure, so I didn't want to say anything, but like, come say hi. There's nothing, especially in times when this team is maybe struggling a little bit. There's nothing that makes me feel better about what we do than when people just want to like say hi and hang out and chat about soccer and chat about your green hair and like whatever it might be, and sort of take the attention off of the grind of the season when we're in like sort of in the heat of it, and just think about the bigger picture and sort of what this community means altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we would like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Check out the Patreon. Again, just the $5 level for the time being. Stay tuned there. Thanks so much for listening. We will be back next week with another giant show to review the Atlanta match, the Vancouver match, and then we'll preview the Open Cup match against Houston and the game against Minnesota, and then cover whatever news, if there's even time to talk about that stuff. Until then, I'm Landon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.
Thank for nothing, see you never.
La gente.
Oh my God.
Zulu chup boom boom sauce.
Yeah.